Okay.
When I'm speaking, can I take them off?
Yes, just before speaking, yes.
Oh, I got a
Sure. Laba diena visi.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is a pleasure to see you all, and I'm very glad to present the delegation of the United Kingdom from the House of Commons and House of Lords of the United Kingdom. We were trying to share our information on the challenges due to war in Ukraine. We also have some challenges with China. And it is obvious that China supports Russia, and it is not a coincidence that all democratic countries see invalid dictators in the same way. During this visit, we had the opportunity to see the situation on the border of Lithuania, to see the changes from spring last year, and also to visit the migration center where Ukrainian refugees come to register. We also saw people, and the situation made it clear that we have to unite, to join our efforts in order to assist people who are victims of war. We will see a growing flows of refugees. There are so many people unable to live longer in their homes. And several millions of people in Ukraine have fled their homes due to the war. They are unable to live in their homes. Our main message was, my colleague Žygimantas Paviljonis, and also the Committee on National Security and Defense and the Committee on Foreign Affairs, we are very happy about the assistance of the United Kingdom given to Ukraine, an active position of the United Kingdom towards Ukraine. We appreciate the assistance and ask for additional assistance to defend against air attacks. And we also spoke about some additional help to Lithuania from the United Kingdom in this difficult situation. Of course, I want to remind you that we are safer than ever, and Britain is helping us to ensure this. We have here with us Sir Ian Duncan Smith, former Conservative leader, Lord David Alton, Mr. Geraint Davis, member of the House of Commons, and Mr. Adam Holloway. We've met the representative of the Taiwanese office in Lithuania, and we spoke about Taiwan's assistance to Ukraine. Now I would like to give the floor to the head of the delegation, Sir Ian Duncan Smith. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much indeed. It's a huge pleasure and a privilege to be here. We came over as members of IPAC, and I have a little statement I want to read out, and we'll all take part in that, and then obviously any questions after it. So as members, all of us, of the Interparliamentary Alliance on China, we've had the privilege of meeting here in Lithuania, parliamentarians, government officials, military leaders, and we've also visited the refugee center as well in our first visit to Vilnius. Deeply grateful for the warm welcome that we have received from our Lithuanian colleagues. Simply, I think it exemplifies the strength and longevity of the growing bond of friendship between the peoples of the United Kingdom and the Baltic states, and we encourage that to strengthen even further. Today, Lithuania, a country that knows only too well what living under the oppressive rule of the Soviet Union was like, has held firm in the face of increasing pressure from authoritarian regimes in both Moscow and Beijing, bravely in the case of Beijing as well. As Putin's senseless war on the Ukraine continues, Lithuania, and worth reminding us, a country of just 2.4 million, has taken at least 27,000, probably more by the time I read this statement, refugees, 1,000 a day since the beginning of this invasion, something which I don't think is fully recognized even back in the United Kingdom. Lithuania has been at the front line of the Moscow-backed Belarusian dictatorship's efforts to destabilize Europe by deceiving and coercing thousands of unregistered individuals into entering Lithuania in an act of heinous state-sponsored human trafficking. We witnessed this yesterday when we were at the border, when we saw the films, the videos of the way in which the Belarusian forces forced these trafficked Iraqis and others over the border to create as much trouble as they could here in Lithuania, something, again, which I don't think is fully understood over in the United Kingdom and probably not in the USA either, and we want to raise that when we get back. Over to you.
Yes, thank you. Lithuania has been uncowed by the vindictive trade sanctions from Beijing and has dared to call the Taiwanese representative office in Vilnius for what it is, an office not just for the city of Tapai, but for all Taiwanese people. As we return to the United Kingdom, we call on our government to take action to support Lithuania by firstly redoubling the UK's defence commitment to the Baltic states, providing an unambiguous deterrent against Russian aggression to the region, supplying, secondly, the Baltic states with the necessary air defence capabilities to establish a defensive dome protecting the region. Thirdly, providing Lithuania and other states with the economic assistance needed to house refugees fleeing the war in Ukraine. And fourthly, committing to reducing strategic dependency on authoritarian regimes, including Russia and China specifically, on critical supply chains, including in energy and rare earth materials, and also in compliance with our climate change commitments. David.
I think it's very important to emphasise that this is a bicameral and bipartisan, all-party and no-party delegation, left, right and centre, but across both houses of the British Parliament. And for us to be able to stand with you and to affirm the sovereign right of Lithuania to develop its relationships with those it wishes to develop relationships with, such as Taiwan, is hugely important. And also, we noticed yesterday when we visited the offices of the Taiwanese delegation in Vilnius, the contrast between the condemnation of Lithuania for daring to allow them to put up a plaque describing who they are, with the total failure of the Chinese Communist Party to condemn the destruction of European cities. Mariupol very strongly on our mind as we think about this David and Goliath struggle which is taking place. And yet the CCP willing to condemn Lithuania for allowing a plaque on a wall, unable to condemn Putin for what he is doing in the Ukraine. We also commend Lithuania for its role in supporting Belarusian opposition figures. And this indeed brings back to my mind all those years in exile. As a young member of the House of Commons, every year I would meet people from Lithuania, from Estonia, from Latvia, who had brought the struggle for freedom to the United Kingdom and were in exile. And it's extraordinary to see you now hosting communities and leaders from Belarus as they struggle for the very things that we take so often too much for granted. So we hope that one of the things the United Kingdom government might do following our visit here would be to raise within the United Nations Human Rights Council the Belarusian regime's support for human trafficking and its abuse of human rights. It is state-sponsored human trafficking that we saw evidence of yesterday when we were at the border. The role that Lukashenko has played in bringing people from places like the Kurdish areas of Iraq, which I visited in 2019, they are being seduced by promises that they will be able to settle ultimately in the European Union. And we saw in evidence on the screens that we looked at yesterday of people being pursued by Belarusian soldiers, pushed across the border and then refused permission to come back when they tried to do so. And finally, I'd like to mention the issue of evidence collection. We were struck today where we saw the very efficient way in which volunteers, but the Red Cross as well, were dealing with the inflow of Ukrainian refugees. It's hugely impressive to see what is being done here in Vilnius. And I was struck that on one of the final completion forms, that those arriving here are being asked to provide evidence of war crimes that they know have taken place in Ukraine. The collecting of evidence is something we must work with you to lay before the International Criminal Court so that one day, just as at Nuremberg, one day those responsible for these appalling crimes against humanity will be brought to justice. Thank you.
Iš tikrųjų,
Indeed, we haven't finished our visit today. We are still going to have a meeting with the Prime Minister, Vice Minister of the Ministry of Defense, Margiris Abukevičius, and we have discussed many things which, as a conclusion, may sound that we need to work together to join our efforts for Ukraine to win the war. And also, together with Žygimantas Pavilionis, my colleague who represents the Conservative Party, we are both the International Alliance on China members, and even we belong to opposing parties, sort of. We managed to talk in one voice regarding China. Yes, I will fully agree with what Dovile has mentioned, because I mean that after Russia invaded Ukraine, all those party differences mean nothing to us anymore, because there are people who are for freedom and those who are against freedom. And now we are just joining our forces. And as far as the UK is concerned, I personally believe that there is no more important country, at least in this European hemisphere, than the UK. Historically, maybe it sounds radical, though, it was like the United States of America for us, being aware how much we are linked to the USA. So the support we received from the UK was of historical importance. The refusal to recognize the occupation, also all those years of occupation, the massive support of the UK when Lithuania joined the EU and NATO. Something happened at that time when, a bit later, when Brexit proceedings started. And now, again, we are witnessing the return of the UK to the region, to the regional affairs. And I, as the former chair of the Committee on Foreign Affairs, can say that the UK is one of our main essential partners in foreign policy. I would never forget our visit to Ukraine, where we meet Tobias Alvid, and I know that Eliza Strass and our Prime Minister are on similar speaking terms. I'm really extremely happy with our relations. Probably there is no closer country in this regard than the UK is. And it is not just the bilateral relations which we are trying to deepen, but also the relationship between the communities. Here we have Dalia Asanavičiūtė with us here today, that represents the Lithuanian community in the UK. I believe that representatives of our community will one day become members of your parliament as well. So, in other words, we are everywhere with the UK today. We are also in the region of Indo-Pacific, creating democracy, fighting for Taiwan, joining our forces for democracy, because after the recent invasion to Ukraine, we have to review our economic relations with autocracies and, roughly speaking, to suspend them and join forces to strengthen our relations with Taiwan and other countries, because this is the only possibility for us to survive, to strengthen democratic ties and to conquer Putin's regime, to deepen democracy in all the regions, to consolidate democracy in Indo-Pacific region, and make the dream of the United Nations a reality, which today has been suspended because of the autocratic forces. Thank you so much for your visit, and I believe that one day we will come to the UK, but I think that all these visits only contribute to our joint aspirations. Thank you so much. Do you have any questions? Thank you so much. I really fully agree with what Dovilė and Žygimantas said, and also to the gratitude to the United Kingdom as far as the aggression of Russia against Ukraine is concerned, the support provided to Ukraine and also Lithuania, because your support is extremely important to Lithuania. Even though today we are not facing a direct threat, the situation is quite dangerous, and your presence in this region is of extreme importance. However, as the UK mentioned, in the UK today, we have about 300,000 of our fellow citizens, and this is why we emphasize the importance to give UK citizenship to our people while preserving Lithuania's citizenship at the same time. While having dual citizenship, you can exert much more influence, even as far as the support for Ukraine is concerned. My question is as follows. Our citizens contribute to the economy of the UK, as has been mentioned, but how could they contribute to your efforts in providing support to Ukraine, maybe?
First of all, it was really helpful meeting you beforehand to discuss with it, and you're quite right that there is a very significant number of people from Lithuania now living and working and obviously adding to the good of the United Kingdom, and they're very welcome to do that. I will take a message back to the government in the United Kingdom that we should engage the Lithuanian groups more, because it would be helpful for us to understand better how to deal with some of the problems of refugees, and not least the whole issues around defense of the Baltic states, and of course the further defense and support for the for the Ukraine. As you know, I think it's worth pointing out, reminding us all that the United Kingdom, I think, has genuinely led the international effort in this. I'm not just saying that because of party politics. I do genuinely believe that the UK, as in politics, has led that. We have been, the Prime Minister and others have been in constant contact with Washington and with the capitals around Europe, and I think everybody has come together at the same time to give that support, and I think it's very important for us to continue doing that. So, you know, the UK will stand by the Baltic states, come what may. I know that for a fact, and wants to and will try to stand by the Ukrainian people as far as they possibly can. There are limitations, as we know, because they're not members of NATO, but I hear today that the UK government has said that they will be sending 5,000 or 6,000 more missiles of different types to the Ukraine, and this will be followed by other support as well. So in a way, we're all on the front line with Ukraine, and we wish them the very best.
May I add that because there's 300,000 Lithuanians in UK, that actually works out at about 1 in 200 people in Britain is from Lithuania, which is an enormous amount of people. Now, they don't have voting rights because they can't have dual nationality. But obviously, Lithuanian people who know, obviously people from Lithuania who are on the front line, as it were, should really talk to people, their friends and neighbours, about how important this is, to urge the UK Parliament to continue to redouble its efforts in terms of providing the defences Ukraine needs to actually repel this sort of unprovoked, illegal, brutal attack from Russia, from Putin, with so many war crimes involved in it, because we cannot stand by and allow the autocracy to just walk over Ukraine because we don't know who will be next.
I would simply add to that having represented a city like the great city of Liverpool, where I was a constituency member of Parliament, we say we have the whole world in one city. And that's certainly true of the United Kingdom more generally, that there are people from many parts of Europe who live in the UK. I personally am receiving many emails from people of Ukrainian descent. I've not received very many from people from the Baltic countries, but I think it's a good thing to write to members of both Houses of Parliament saying, please don't remain silent on this and be engaged in this issue. I mean, you'll remember the lessons from the 1930s that people thought that Czechoslovakia was a faraway country about which we knew very little. We did nothing about Sudetenland, we did nothing about Czechoslovakia, and then we were surprised when Poland was invaded, and of course it led to a world war. So the earlier you can take action, the better. And we who are privileged to live in parliamentary democracies should use all the opportunities that we have. So I hope that the Lithuanian Friendship Group with the UK, which has a sister organisation in the UK Parliament, I hope that you will encourage the community to write. On the issue of citizenship as well, probably unlike my two colleagues, I have passports from two countries because my mother, her first language wasn't English, it was Irish, and she settled in the United Kingdom after the Second World War, married my father who'd been demobbed from the army after the war, and I've had to grow up with both the positives and the minuses of the relationship between the United Kingdom and Ireland, which has not always, as you know, been an easy one. And I value this, so do my children and our grandchildren, this value of having two passports. You don't hate one country because you love another. It can teach you a great deal about how to coexist and learn to live together. And Mr. Putin needs to learn this lesson too, the appalling way in which the people of Ukraine are being treated by him. This is a murderous intent, which is certainly a war crime that we are seeing, and certainly crimes against humanity. And I think all of us, many Russians feel that way too. And I think they must also get in touch with people who are members of the British Parliament and sister parliaments around the world and say, look, do not believe that Putin represents us. The things that he is doing in our name are not things that we agree with. And it's crucially important that members of the British Parliament especially do hear that. So thank you for your question.
Okay, so, yes, please.
I just wanted to express gratitude for the Villa to make and her team this visit possible. It was great. As I was writing in Facebook, you know, she was like a foreign minister for 2 days. And Lord, specifically to you, thank you for educating my son in Liverpool, who graduated in cybersecurity, and he will be defending us from Kremlin trolls most efficiently. Thank you for it.
So, thank you, everyone. We could have one more question, and then we have to run to a meeting with the Prime Minister. Yes, please.
I'm from Central News Agency of Taiwan. My question is, we're now seeing West actively supporting Ukraine. And if anything similar should happen to Taiwan, and I hope it won't, may we Taiwanese expect a similar robust support from the West? And what should be done by the international community to deter China?
Well, let me start. The others may wish to come in. A little while ago, I helped organize and start an organization called the Interparliamentary Alliance on China. We call it IPAC, which Davile and others are all been part of this. And the idea was to get countries around the world with parliamentarians on the left and on the right to come together to express their concern about the nature of the Chinese government, its existing abuses, and its threats, extraterritorial threats to areas like Taiwan. It has a bad record in that area. We had a treaty, as you may recall, the UK and the Chinese, the Sino-British Agreement on Hong Kong, which the Chinese government simply tore up early and is now imposing a very stringent security law on the people of Hong Kong and arresting them for what they call terrorism offences, but in fact they're nothing more than protesting. So we have a very good understanding of how abusive the Chinese government can be when it wishes to be, and intolerant. And it makes, I know, perpetual threats to Taiwan, and those threats aren't just gestures. As we are learning, or should have learned before, that over Ukraine, when a totalitarian state like Russia or China threatens things, it tends to follow through and do them. It's a mistake of ours to overinterpret what they mean by that. It's always a good idea to say they mean what they say. There is no hidden meaning. And in the case of Taiwan, they are, I know, under overflying, and they are practicing naval exercise as well within the territorial waters of Taiwan. I know for a fact that the US government stands by its commitment to support and defend Taiwan. They've reissued that commitment, as I understand President Biden has. The UK has also said categorically that it would look to support Taiwan in the event of any aggressive takeover by China. And the recent sailing of one of the new UK aircraft carriers to the island, past the island, was an indication of support. And you'll see more of the UK involved in the Far East as a result.
So if I may add also a little bit, in Lithuania, probably, it's fine. So in Lithuania, we of course have differing opinions. Some people, at least until the war, viewed China mostly as economic power. Many of us, of course, understand that this is an authoritarian regime which is committing genocide against Uyghur people. So to place much trust into such dictatorship, communist dictatorship, is really naive. Now, when war started of Russia against Ukraine, and China is trying to sit two chairs, People's Republic of China, and on one hand not sending guns to Russia, but then on the other hand refusing to condemn what Russia is doing, I think the answer is clear to everyone. If democratic world was able to unite to try to do everything in our power to help Ukraine defend not only its freedom, but defend Europe's security architecture, which Russia is trying to dismantle, then I have hope in us that if People's Republic of China attacks Taiwan, then we would be able to stand as united as we are standing now. But also what is important, if we let Ukraine fall, that would be very inspiring for People's Republic of China. If we protect Ukraine, if we defend Ukraine and Europe all together, then I think that would be a lesson, a hard lesson for People's Republic of China. The democratic world sometimes may be slow and messy and sometimes bureaucratic, but we do unite, we are efficient, and we can be speedy when it's necessary.
I would add to that, if I may, for a moment, simply to say I entirely agree with what de Ville has just said. The choice for us in the West is going to be increasingly between dictatorship or democracy. We have to know with whom we stand. 23 million people live in Taiwan. I visited Taiwan. I've seen it as a free, vibrant, democratic society. I recently argued in Parliament that we, in Western nations and free societies, should simultaneously, not one country, but all these countries simultaneously should properly recognize Taiwan. Not just because of the pandemic and the way that Taiwan was squeezed out of important procedures and meetings at the World Health Organization, but because Taiwan is entitled to determine its own future and it should be seen as part of the family of nations. I visited Western China, I visited Tibet, I've been in Hong Kong. And when I look at what's happened to the destruction of democracy in Hong Kong, when I look at what de Ville has rightly described as the genocide against Uyghur people in Xinjiang, when you think about the aggression in the South China Sea, when you think about Tibet and the horrors that have occurred there over the years, you can see that the situation really is one that we can't just ignore. The writing is on the Chinese wall, and we have got to respond by standing with the people of Taiwan, because after Ukraine, otherwise Taiwan could well be next.
Quite right.
And can I finally say that the eyes of the world are on China in relation to Ukraine? Because if they're willing to impose draconian trade sanctions on Lithuania, over a plaque on a wall in the Taiwanese representatives, and yet they're not willing to impose sanctions on Russia as they commit war crimes. We're looking at what they're going to do if something appalling happens in Mariupol. And if they do nothing, continue to prop up Russians' regime, Putin's regime, and the war crimes we're seeing, then I think the West need to think about what sanctions to take in turn. So one step at a time, but I think the game is on.
So thank you everyone for attending and hope to see you next time. Bye.